Hello, and welcome to Brooding in Bloodhallow. I'm your ever-immortal host, Blood, and tonight, shall be the subject of war. Well, that is to say, the subject of conflict. Now, conflict is a part of nature, a part of being alive. The start of it all was in the beginning just the smallest single-celled amoebas needed sustenance. Now eventually it got to the point where it was one cell eating another cell. And as everything evolved and got bigger and worse, we eventually got to the point of herbivores, carnivores, and omnivores. Now with that, it became a constant struggle for food, where it was a case of carnivore would eat herbivore would eat plants. Now, you wouldn't think this be a conflict of eating plants, but it is considered one life eating another. But it got worse as we evolved and got to the point of, as I said last time, Neanderthals. It became Neanderthals going for sustenance. First, they would fight the actual animals, and it was considered a fight because they were equally matched. Now, not equally matched in the fact that they had similar strength and intelligence. No, it was equally matched in the fact that they both had weapons. Cavemen started with rocks and clubs, then went on to spears, onward to knives and swords, and then we got to bows and arrows, guns. But as I said, the humans, the Homo sapiens, killed the Neanderthals. Now, that was a large conflict, a war, as it were. But it was a genocide, actually, because even though we were similar in the same branch and such, it was two different species. Now, when I say genocide, that means one species killing another, but it also means races. But we shall get onto that later, because I'm going to tell you how it got divided upon more and more. You see, conflict is subcategorized. You go to a scuffle, which is when two opposing forces are verbal, or they just display their anger towards the other. Now, then we go into duels. Duels are where each opponent is equally capable of defeating the other, but it is in the case of one is going to die. That is the point of a duel. Two equally opposing forces, one shall die, the other shall live. Now, it always isn't that, but then we go on to fighting. Well, sparring is where two forces go at each other, but one is knocked down. Now, both live, both go on with their day, but it goes into fighting, where two opponents, sometimes actually well equal to each other in capabilities, will go at each other. Now, one is going to be knocked out instead of just knocked down. Now, they can hope to be carried out on a stretcher, but it is equally a possibility to be carried out in a body bag. Now, for that, we then also go on to combat. Now, combat is by nature when two forces fight, but there may be the case of a knockout, but not necessarily death. But it goes to the case of they can be given weapons, or it can be changed that it may become that it is a fight to the death. Now, we also go on to slaughter. Now, slaughter is when one force has greater, not ambition, but powers, or in this case, weapons. Now, slaughter is something that occurred when humans first figured out domestication of animals. That is when we figured out, hey, instead of running after the animals, fighting the animals, we can just get two animals, make them have a baby, and so on and so forth. And then we just kill the bigger animals, yada yada yada. Now, it is slaughter because those domesticated animals were incapable of fighting back. We had the weapons, they were just sitting ducks, as it were. Now, eventually, it got to the point where humans started fighting other humans, either for land, food, or other resources. Now, when I say slaughter, it's a case of when we are a warring race. That is, say, humans are a warring species. We thrive on conflict. We have evolved to be amazing at conflict. We have great stamina. We walk bipedal, so it leaves our hands free to use weapons. We have great eyesight. We have dexterity. Humans are, in fact, the only mammal with a rotating wrist that is capable of adding force. We have actually evolved for throwing spears, rocks, and other projectiles. We even have sports that are based on the act of throwing, the perfection of throwing, all because of our opposable thumbs. Now, we evolved from apes so that we had opposable thumbs. Now, as we stopped climbing on trees, swinging from trees, and started running everywhere, we still kept our opposable thumbs, but we were able to get to the flicking of the wrist. Now, as we progressed and gained better technology for even ways of life to make our way of life better, it got applied to warring. Now, as this technology progressed, we eventually got to the fact that if we so dictated, a single nation with superior firepower, such as how China was the first to figure out gunpowder, well, black powder for fireworks, but can be used for guns and cannons, it eventually got to the point where they started taking over countries with that knowledge. Now, as we progressed, as it got more and more towards these small towns, these small villages that were being destroyed and attacked, technically they were slaughtered. They had no way to defend themselves because of the fact that it was new technology. They had no knowledge of it. They didn't even know how it worked, mainly because it was not actually shown and shared, and the secrets that were stolen had to get to the military of an opposing country. But even then, the small villages wouldn't have been helped in any way, shape, or form, because until that military got there with the new technology to oppose the technology of the other army, they were technically just left to the towns to be slaughtered. Well, they didn't leave the towns to be slaughtered, but it's a case of they could not help, because it was not until the actual early 1800s that we figured out steam engines. So there was nothing quicker than horses. And horses, even able to get up to 30 miles per hour, and keep that space for about an hour are only able to go 30 miles. And if you're having a village attacked 200 miles away, you've got at least 7 hours. And that is if you use carrier pigeon, a horse, like, no matter how fast that news travels, that town is destroyed, pillaged. So we go to that would be slaughter. Now, eventually, if it was a case of that army that was meant to oppose the new technology with their own secrets stolen and incorporated, then if they were still killed, then it's considered a massacre. They had the ability to defend themselves. They had an equal chance to win in terms of firepower. But it's a case of between strategy and the fact that there would be far more numbers makes them lose in that battle. Now, war is when two different opposing countries, it's a large amount of people, are equally matched in firepower and numbers. And they are fighting for either land or own personal beliefs. Now, during the Crusades in the 1300s, that was considered not war, but a large slaughtering, because it was a case of individuals that believed in Christianity would go about killing all these other villagers and settlers and such that may not have been equipped. Like, they were just farmers, pretty much. Everyone was a farmer. If you did not make money from a actual skill, such as blacksmithing, leatherworking, cobbling, furniture making, masonry, you had to farm. There was only so many actual professions, but there were many openings for it, mainly because during that time they were also recouping from the Black Plague. Now, conflict is a part of human nature. It is part of all nature. Now, we always fear war and such as well, because it is, like I said in the last episode, the other night, as it were, we fear death. Now, war does not guarantee death, but it can open up an avenue to where we can wish to have died, to where we can be wounded in such a way that we may still live, but it may not be in our interest. We may find it not good to keep on living. And then it goes to the case of surviving. Surviving is not living, per se. Such as, I would, if injured in war, you may still be alive, and you may be surviving. You can go about every single day surviving. But because you're not in top condition, you would not consider yourself living, per se. Now, that is not to say that war is completely bad in the fact that you may be injured or killed. And war is not exactly something that should be sought. It is merely a case of, as nature intends, as we go forward, the actual nature of humans is not to exactly seek war, but we have a knack for inciting it. With the complexity and way of tone and different vocabularies, as well as different languages. Phrases can be said differently that may incite anger and such to another individual. And if that individual has many friends or is a higher ranking individual that has the authority to command an army to actually declare war, then that shall be the way it goes. Now, I personally go by the act of not inciting anger and not allowing anger to be incited in me. It goes along the thought process of anger and anger, ignorance, and it leads one to be alienated and alone. It's a case of you can feel anger, but to allow it to consume you, or you to be angry and cause anger in another person, for it to consume them, and you to not know what you could have not said to make them angry, or you to not know how to make yourself less angry, can lead to yourself being alienated, as in them as well as anyone that has actually befriended them or associate themselves with them, can leave you completely alone. And the thing about the human brain is that we are social creatures. We evolved to better communicate and better group ourselves. There is no such thing as a natural lone wolf, as in humans, like wolves, believe in a pack mentality, to where we would rather be with a group of individuals that may not always share our points of opinion or our thoughts than be alone. The individual that is alone is not alone by choice. They have either been lost or have just not found. Now, war can cause many people to become lost. War may be a natural part of life, but humans have evolved to be less wanting of war. Many people that have seen war have never been themselves after war, because it has become a part of our mentality for compassion and kindness to always be there, for guilt, as it were. Unlike other species that may kill their own or kill other species, we in our base do feel guilt. So when we kill another person, we feel guilt about it. Now there are those of us that have been born that whether it's neurological or psychological may not feel that guilt. Now if it's neurological, the cards were against them. They were dealt a hand and they naturally lost, because there is no fixing a neurological problem. You can be medicated for it. They can try to help you, but ultimately it cannot be fixed. So if you wish for war and you do not feel guilt or compassion or any actual emotions for that matter, you are shit out of luck, as it were. Now psychological is easier, because you can be medicated for it. You can talk about it. You can actually be given the help you may require. Now, it may not be perfect. You may still have a tendency towards violence and no compassion or guilt, but you can be better. Psychological can be helped. It can be managed. Now, conflict is a problem. As I said about the Crusades, it was beliefs. Now, there are many countries that have the same beliefs, but either it be resources or land and such, they may differ. Conflict is the way of human nature. We fight, we slaughter, we war. And as we go on, we strive for better weapons of war. Each time weapons and technology gets better, the wars become worse. We went from rocks and clubs to atomic bombs, nuclear warheads that we could press a button and launch halfway around the world and easily kill a million people and destroy a whole entire 50-mile radius. That is how we progressed in terms of war. We sometimes don't even have a reason for it. It can be a simple insult or some such. It may be a case of one leader does not fully agree with the way another leader runs their country. And that is where we get into why speaking is somewhat dangerous. You see, tone and words can be easily misinterpreted. It also becomes worse when translation occurs, because not all languages have a real basic translation. It sometimes goes into a case of context is more needed. English is the worst offender only because we do have accents. That is to say, we have the actual squiggles, the dots, the lines. We have it all over our letters. But even in college courses, English in college, they're still never used. We speak English, we write English, but the context of the words differs depending on how the sentence is written. The biggest problems is read, which is say, I will read this book. And past tense, I have read this book. All because of the difference in the words preceding, ended in the difference in the word actually succeeding. Now, there is a case of, in other languages, depending on how you put emphasis on a certain point of the word, or the sentence, how long the sentence is, how long the word is said, changes its meaning. This is how we get conflicts. In the beginning, like when it is said that when the French and the Irish first met, that there was, the French have no word for potato. That is to say, they have a word, but its literal translation is apple of the earth. And it is said that there many of the rivers at one point were said by the same name. that is because the literal translation meant river in its native language. And when asked what that is, or what that river is, it's just, oh, that's that word. Now, sometimes language can help. It can be a way to bring in culture, to mix in culture. As you go along, you see many English words can come from Spanish words, and those Spanish words come from French and Italy. And then you've got Swedish, then French, like many of the languages span from other languages, and you can see the progression. But as time went on, as this group separated from that group, as these people explored and those ones didn't, that the language changed. That's why we have the case of, if you go farther south, like I'm personally in Minnesota, if I were to go more south, like Texas, or some such, there would be a definitive redneck, as it were, in quotation marks, accent. It would be, you all done not need in here. Like, that is how it goes. And then you go farther up into Canada, and they have French, Inuit, and they do have English, but it has been mixed with Scandinavian. So they get that accent of, oh, geez, hey, yeah, but I'll do that. Yeah, just let me on through. That such. But it goes on to that, and it can cause conflicts, because depending on, you have some individuals that are quick to anger, will say, oh, don't take that tone with me, or I don't like the way you talk around here. It gets into this point where if you talk different, it can be perceived as either a mark of your intelligence or a mark of your arrogance. If you speak more proper of the language around people who speak more, not simplified, but it's with that more rural country-like accent, they can consider you to be more intelligent or arrogant, as it were, thinking, oh, you're too good around here to speak the way we speak. Now, if a conflict is avoided in that situation, then they can learn each other's culture. Now, yes, they're two different Americans, so by all means, there is no real cultural difference, but it is a case of there are subcultures, to where you have the difference between California and the Midwest, or New York and Texas. It's the difference in either money or living conditions or how you work. Like, there are multiple subcultures, and conflict can either bring two together or destroy one. Many older cultures were destroyed by wars. Look at the Greeks, the Romans, the many African tribes have been destroyed due to it. Like, they have many of the, as I said, the Crusades occurred. Then during the pirating era, many vessels were destroyed. But that was more of a case of pirating was not for the greed per se. It was more of a case of they were forced to get water or food from another ship that decided to go on by. It was a crime of opportunity. But if you've done it once, you have to keep doing it. Because after you've been marked a pirate, you'll be killed for being a pirate. Now, as the Industrial Revolution went on, we got to steam. Now, steam wasn't exactly a war inciter or a way to make war better, but using steam, we were able to make trains that got us from one point of the world to the other, from one end of the continent to the other end. So it allowed us to get more supplies from one place to another. And same with making of weapons, as the steam engines and other machines that ran on steam were created. It allowed the manufacturing of better and more weapons. It went from a case of one person can make 10 of these weapons in an hour to one person working this machine can easily make 100, and then eventually it got it onto assembly lines, where it's a case of one man went, hey, if you do this part, and they do that part, and that person does that part, we can easily kick up a good 2,000 of these things in an hour. And as it got onto boats and planes and bombs, we got into more killing. Sure, planes allowed us to go from one continent to another to bring more supplies to better out our exports and imports. Same with ships. They were seen as ways to make war easier. For this person to pilot that plane with that bomb on it and go and kill 100 of the enemy with just the push of a button. And ships, well, instead of taking a month to get from one continent to the other, it went down to a week. And within that week, instead of only being able to fit maybe 300 people, it got to 3,000 or even 30,000. We do not make advances just for the sake of making advances. We make them so that way we can also have an easier way of war. Now, that is to say that there have been many speculations about Area 51. Many people believe aliens are there. But I personally believe that it is a facility that is a branch of the Air Force that is dedicated to the research and development of better ways of modes of transport. So we can get faster planes, faster ships, faster cars, just better ways to help us do stuff. But as it is run by the military is considered a top secret. You'll be shot. You'll be just absolutely effed up if you were to trespass. That is because they cannot risk other countries getting the secrets. Because if there is a conflict, there is a war, it is better to be on the side of the country with leading edge technology than to be against the country with leading edge technology. And if another country steals the leading edge technology, then it becomes a bit of a stalemate. That whole nuclear war thing is both incited and not incited, because it's a case of we have the bombs, they have the bombs. As long as we don't launch the bombs, they don't launch the bombs. It's a case of, in chess it would be considered a stalemate. Each side holds either all the pieces or only one of the pieces, but as long as each side holds one single piece, a key piece. No one can make a move. Now, it could be a case of they have only a king and we only have a king. It could be they have a full set of pieces, but we have a full set of pieces. But until that war occurs, it shall not occur, because we would not incite it. Now, it is a delicate thing. War is a delicate time. There have been laws made for war. If you break those laws, it is considered a war crime. We have had multiple meetings between all the countries deciding on these laws. It started with Geneva. Then we had the Vienna Accords, and so on and so forth. And as we progress in technology, those records, those accords, they must be updated. But they cannot be updated until the new weapons come out. So that is why they have blanket conditions, to where it's a case of the use of poisonous gas shall not be used. The use of chemical agents shall not be used. Whereas it's not describing a particular agent or gas, but it is stating what cannot be used, because if made, it then categorizes, and so on and so forth. And war is sad. War is dangerous. War should not be sought. It should be peaceful discussions. A way with peace, everyone can be included, and cultures can be combined, and not destroyed, but kept pristine and protected. Because if everyone in a particular race is killed, none of their stories get told, their culture gets forgotten. That was what Hitler had sought for the Jews. It was the Second World War, and it was the biggest world war we had. For years it was considered, World War I was considered the Great War. It wasn't until the Second Great War that they considered it World War I and World War II. Now, Hitler got through 6 million Jews. That is to say, 6 million completely recorded. But the estimated number is closer to 12 million. To where, at one point, some of the Nazis became extreme. Hitler was like, let's round them up, number them, put them in a camp, and kill them not willy-nilly. But there were some extremists that did get killing willy-nilly. So it wasn't that 12 million were ordered to be killed. Only 6 million were ordered personally by Hitler to be killed. It's just a case of 12 million were killed. We cannot discard history, we can only learn from it. War is our history. It is in our nature. We can seek to be better. We can seek to not seek war. But in the end, war is and has always been in the nature of humans. That is it. That is how it is. I cordially await to all you to listen to my next Brooding in Bloodhallow. Have a good one. This has been Blood.